Well, there was confusion and then tragedy. Just 1 month and a day after that Air Canada plane collided with a fire truck, killing 2 pilots at New York's LaGuardia Airport, the Transportation Safety Board has released an interim report. Before we get to that, let's listen briefly to audio from the air traffic control tower when the driver of the truck is told to stop entering the runway where the plane was landing.
Stop, truck one, stop. Stop, truck one, stop.
At 9 seconds, the tower instructed truck 1 to stop. And at 4 seconds, the tower again instructed truck 1 to stop. At 0 seconds, the recording ended.
So the key question in the aftermath of the crash was, why didn't the driver stop? Did he hear that command? And we're starting to get answers. We have 2 journalists who are standing by to take us through the story in a moment, Mark Miller, but let's start with Sarah Galashan with the latest on what we're learning.
Ian, well, the short answer to that, we find it on page 6 of this 15-page preliminary report from the NTSB, and it's the section I've highlighted here. And basically what it says is that yes, actually, one of the individuals in that fire truck that went by the call sign Truck 1 did hear the command to stop. I want to read you that section and put it up on a board for you to read along. It reads, the turret operator in Truck 1 recalled hearing the words, stop, 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 on the tower frequency radio, but he did not know who that transmission was intended for. He subsequently heard Truck 1, stop, 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 and realized it was for them and subsequently noticed that they had entered the runway. Both of those occupants of Truck 1, they did thrive. And so the NTSB investigators were able to interview them, and that's where they're getting the information. The 2 Canadian pilots, of course, Antoine Foray and Mackenzie Gunther, they were killed really seconds after having landed on runway 4, which they were cleared for landing when they collided with Truck 1. Truck 1 was one of 7 emergency vehicles out on the tarmac, making their way to another airplane that was elsewhere grounded, dealing with its own emergency. Truck 1 had as well been cleared to make a crossing of runway 4, but then quickly that was retracted. That turret operator, 12 years experience with aircraft rescue and fighter fighting, also said in that statement at the end that he further recalled that as they turned left, he saw the airplane's lights on the runway. CBC spoke earlier with an NTSB investigator who says it's that part really that raises more questions for him. But take a listen.
It's apparent that one of the firemen did in fact see the lights of the airplane. My question as an investigator, which I don't think they answered, is, well, did you say something to your partner in the fire truck once you saw the lights of the airplane? Did you warn them, hey, there's an airplane on the runway, or question?
I should point out, there was so much information that came out immediately after that crash. No one ever had any questions about the conduct of the 2 Air Canada pilots. They seemed to do everything perfectly. There were questions about the firefighters and also questions about the air traffic controllers. Have we learned anything about them?
Yeah, they do address that in this preliminary report. There were 2 operators, and we knew that, in the control tower. One was the local controller who had 18 years experience and had been in the position he was staffing for 42 minutes before the accident. The other was ground command, but was also acting as the controller in charge. 19 years experience at this and had been 51 minutes in position before this accident happened. He had been primarily dealing with that ground emergency that I referenced earlier, while the other had taken over the radio commands, speaking directly and offering instructions both to those on the ground and, of course, to those Air Canada pilots who were incoming. And in terms of the vehicles, as I say, those emergency vehicles, there were 7 of them in all. But on page 12 of the report, what we see is a snapshot of the radar that they were looking at and studying, in addition to speaking with, the multiple vehicles. It's so much going on, as you say, and this is what they are seeing. The problem is, and we had heard this earlier at the press conference after this accident had happened, that these emergency vehicles were not equipped with proper transponders. And that was an initial criticism that had come out from the NTSB. This is what they were seeing. There was the ability for radar to pick up some of these emergency vehicles on the ground. But what you see here, this is the airplane coming in, you see only 2 spots indicated for emergency vehicles on the ground. There were 7 in all. And so that really, Ian, would have complicated what those 2 traffic controllers were dealing with in terms of trying to study the map and realize where everything was happening with only seconds to make decisions.
Yeah, and the New York area airports, of which LaGuardia is one of them, had made a decision, a policy decision, not to put those transponders in the individual fire trucks. Had they done that, there would have been clear indications of 7 trucks there, and that might have warned the tower that, and it actually would have triggered a system that would have helped warn the tower that there is a potential conflict on that runway. Sarah, thank you very much. As we often do on these aviation stories, let's bring in Mark Miller, a journalist and pilot, and he's joining us this evening from Whistler, British Columbia, with some more insights into this preliminary report from the NTSB. Mark, as you look through this report, what stands out to you?
Well, Sarah did a great job of summarizing it. I mean, you know, the fact that these guys, we now know for sure they didn't have a transponder. I was a bit surprised to hear that it wasn't 1 truck, it was 7. You know, in the video, we could see there were other flashing lights there just before impact, but I didn't realize there were 7 trucks in total. The one thing that really caught my attention, Ian, was the fact that the initial stop, which occurs, I think they said 9 seconds before impact, that first truck in that, let's call it a parade of trucks, was still more than 100 meters away from the center line. It was 410 feet away, traveling at about 11 miles an hour, and continued to accelerate till it entered the runway and was going somewhere just under 30 miles an hour. So why did that truck not hear the initial stop that occurred, you know, well in advance of this impact? That is, to me, the central question.
I want to remind viewers of the moments in the control tower before the crash. Let's listen.
Frontier 4195, just stop there, please. Stop, truck 1, stop. Stop, truck 1, stop. Stop, truck 1, stop.
Yeah, it is haunting, Mark, to hear that video. This is just an interim report. It's remarkable to me that it comes out so quickly. It's a month and a day after this crash, but there is a lot of investigating still to be done. What are you looking for?
Well, you know, the National Transportation Safety Board has been, I think, really transparent on this one. Jennifer Homaday, who is the new chair there, she was a very experienced investigator. I got to speak with her on a number of occasions. She's putting it all out there. And, you know, that news conference right after the accident was, again, remarkable for the amount of information we got. You know what's interesting about these final reports that we will get in probably 18 to 24 months on this is that the information, the recommendations made by the Transportation Safety Board, and also the Transportation Safety Board in Canada will be involved, those are not binding. They're recommendations. The FAA can choose to either implement those recommendations or completely ignore them. And I guarantee you one of the recommendations will be that that fire truck should have a transponder on board.
Yeah. Listen, I spent a lot of time on this program kind of frustrated, you know, expressing my frustration about public agencies that don't disclose information in a timely way. And I have to say the NTSB is the opposite of that, at least in this case. And yet, you know, you're talking about maybe 18 months to 24 months before we have a final report. Yeah. So some people may be wondering, how could it possibly take that long?
Well, Ian, this isn't, I described it to somebody today as this isn't a broken wire accident. This isn't an airplane was flying along and a wire broke and, you know, the cockpit erupted in flames. It's not that. This is a human factors accident. There was a human error made here that somebody didn't hear something or somebody didn't say something and the accident occurred. Now, it is possible. We heard earlier in the report there was another truck called Truck 7 that made the initial call to the ground controller asking for permission to move around the airport. But Truck 7 gave up. He couldn't reach anybody. The question is why? Is this an indication that there maybe was a broken wire somewhere in the system, that there was something wrong with the radios? Or is this that fundamental problem that you and I have talked about radio transmissions are linear. One person can talk, that person has to stop talking, the next person talks. If two people talk on top of each other, the radios just squeal and nobody hears anything. In fact, we know that played a role in the accident, that mid-air collision at Reagan National, a little over a year ago. So is this part of the antiquated radio systems that we're still using at these airports? And then the final element for me here is, as a Canadian, and the rules for landing at airports in the US, at LaGuardia, a very busy airport, is airplanes are allowed to be cleared to land in sequence. So there can be 3 airplanes landing, each with a landing clearance on the same runway. In Canada, I cannot get a landing clearance until whatever vehicle's on the runway or whatever airplane that landed ahead of me vacates the runway. Now that takes more time, and we get, we're squeezing, less sausage through the system. At LaGuardia and at other American airports, they deal with the sort of the overcrowding issue by issuing these multiple clearances. And I've had a number of Canadian pilots mention to me, this is a concern for them.
Yeah, well, let's finish with this. We have about 30 seconds left, Mark. You and I both like being in the air. You as a pilot and a passenger, me as a passenger. Does this case and what happened in Washington, D.C. give you any pause, any anxiety about flying in or out of the United States?
Well, yesterday you and I were on talking about a near midair at an airport just a few miles away, JFK, yesterday. Again, because they're trying to squeeze so much stuff in there that mistakes happen. And that mistake yesterday, or 2 days ago, I guess now, could have been a midair collision. I'm not saying don't fly. I am hoping that the FAA recognizes that we have a growing issue here about volumes. And I don't know if there's a technology fix. They've already decided as SFO that they're going to slow down those parallel runways. And, the attempt is to try to reduce the risk of a midair there. Maybe we're going to have to start thinking about slowing things down a little bit in that New York area.
Always nice having you on the program, Mark. Mark Miller, aviation journalist and pilot. Thank you.
Ian.